All right.
Hi there, I'm David Batsoffen, and I host a travel blog called Travel and Things. And currently, to keep myself sane during lockdown that this pandemic has brought to our shores here in Africa, I'm doing a series called In Conversation With. And over the past few weeks, I've been watching a series called Dry Bar Comedy. And one of the comedians who caught my attention was Mike P. Burton. And would you believe, from New York at 10 o'clock in the morning, I have him on the line. Mike, how are you doing? And thank you so much for joining me.
I'm very good. I think this is my first time in South Africa, so I'm very excited.
Well, welcome. You never know. It may open doors for you. It may slam doors in your face. I don't
That's
know.
true. That's right. That's everywhere, but yes, that's true.
Yeah. Let's start, because this is how I found you. Let's start with Dry Bar.
Okay.
The comedians that I've seen on there are not necessarily, with all due respect, as far as I know, are not top level. They're not your Jerry Seinfelds. They're not your Howie Mandels. These are working class stand-up comedians who do cruise ships, who do clubs, who do bars, like yourself. But you guys are so funny. I have taken every morning before I start work to watch at least one comedian. It just sets the tone for the rest of my day.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, you know what? It is, I guess, no-name comics, but
Mm.
everybody that I've seen on there can do a great job. They're all really good, really strong comics. Some of them I've known for a long time, like the alumni that
Yeah.
have done Dry Bar. Some of the guys I've known for years, and they're great. Always funny. I did colleges with some of them. Some of them I haven't seen in years, but they're still funny. And it's a really good group. It's an eclectic group. I think they want that.
Yeah.
And but it's guys that when you first book it, and it has to be like the whole promotion are the clean comics and doing clean comedy.
Yeah.
Has a stigma of, oh no, that's not going to be funny. Where's clean comedy? What's nice comedy? And so the guys that I know that have done it, Josh Sneed, Lucas Bone, Warren B. Hall, all these great comics can go into pretty much any situation and do well. They're not just church comics.
Mm.
I've done shows from like just hell gig bars to temples and churches, family resort and the couples resort. It's
Right.
You have to be able to walk into any situation. The guys that you're talking about, like the big names, they get to a level where they sell out a theater of people that are just there to see them. They're fans. When you watch Dry Bar, you don't know who you're going to see. They have some fans, but you're just hoping. It's like when you go to a comedy club,
Yeah.
just out somewhere, just, hey, let's just go have a nice night of comedy, but you don't know who it is. People don't come. There's some people that come see me, but for the most part, if it's a 300 seat place, 299 have never heard of him. So what am I going to do? I got to try to be funny.
The one that I saw, which is how I found you, as I've made mention, you picked is the wrong word, but you asked a young Nicaraguan woman to shout abuse at you, and what does she do? She goes, "Hola," and you go, "I wanted abuse. I didn't want you to say hello to me."
Right. Yeah. But I like that. I like the risk of it. It's definitely a risk doing crowd work in that setting where it's recorded, and it could either work or not work, and you're praying. And it's also in Utah, so the odds of having a Latino there were not great. The fact that I got one, I was like, all right, we got one, and it worked out. And she was great. She couldn't have been better. And it just worked out. It's funny watching the comments on, like when you watch a clip in the comments,
Yeah.
and some people loved it and some people hated it. And that's just kind of what comedy is.
Well, I know I had to look at the stats, and I think like 800,000 people or 8,000 people had watched or something like that. It was a ridiculous number. And then 571 didn't like you. And I thought, okay, but for what reason? Let's be subjective here. You wanted to be like TripAdvisor for comedy. You wanted to be broken down into excellent, good, average, terrible, ask for your money back type stuff. so that you know.
There's
But
still some.
I'm sure there are, Mike. Um, is there only one comedian on per evening, or do they do a whole series and then cut them for YouTube or wherever else they're putting them currently?
When I did it, we had two comedians. I did it with Eric Hunter, a really good comic from the Midwest.
Right.
And we had a warm-up comic, and he does like 10 minutes, gets the audience, here's what you can expect, here's what you're going to do. And then we each did 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, when the guys are going in, I think they do 4 a night, but they're doing 20 minutes each.
Oh, okay.
So
you're just getting into your stride, and then they go, thank you and good night.
Right. And when I taped mine, I had 2 of the mishaps they had never had before, because that's the way my career works. You do 2 shows.
Yeah.
You do 2 shows. You do early and a late.
Yeah.
And so, and I went on second on both shows. Eric went up, no glitches whatsoever. Did his whole set. Everything was perfect. Couple of minutes wait. Here I come. And when I got up there, you have a clock, because your 40 minutes is 40 minutes. So there's a clock up on the side, and I could just glance up there and know where I was. And I looked up what I knew to be about 25 minutes in, but I just kind of wanted to gauge where I was so you can start getting to the end and have it time out.
Yeah.
Because I was playing with the audience and everything. And I looked up and it was stuck on 38. And I went, that couldn't be right. There's no way. I've only done 2 minutes from the countdown. And so I did a couple more minutes and I looked back up and it was 38. I went, there's no way. So I timed it out. I knew what I was doing. And when I thought it was 5 minutes, I actually got the light in the back of the room, which is normal at a comedy club.
Yes.
Where you get the light. And so I got the light and I knew it. I was like, oh, I'm dead on. Oh, I couldn't be better at this. This is perfect. And so at the end of it, I do this for a living somehow. And so at the end, they were like, really sorry, that's never happened before. I was like, all right. So then come to second show, look up, the clock is working fine. Excellent. That's a good sign. I'm going through the set, and all of a sudden the lights on the other side of the room just came on. We're in the dark, we're having a set, and all the lights in this one back section came on. And like fluorescent lights, not good lights, fluorescent lights. So now people are sitting, looking around, and in my head now, you're doing the set. I knew the first set went well. And so now in my head, it's, do I bring that up? Do I leave that alone? And I'm talking the whole time this is going on, but I have way other thoughts in my head. And I went, you know what? Just power through it. It doesn't matter. We got a good one in the can. Don't mess this up by talking about the lighting. Let's just go. And so I did that, and I came back into the show where, like, when you're talking and you also have different thoughts in your head, it's almost never good, especially for comedy. You start messing up words. And I came back and was like, I don't even know where I am in this joke. Oh, there I am. Okay. All right. Look at that. Okay. I'm doing it again. And, but there were 2 mishaps, and they said, that's never happened before. We don't know how it happened. And I was like, of course, again, that's the way my career works.
So then, and just quickly before we look at your career, do they change audiences, or are they the same audience for both shows? New audience?
Brand new audience.
Okay.
They have, I think we had like an hour, maybe hour and a half break, get those people out, new people in. And, and they were great. Both audiences were phenomenal. They really were. You walk out of there going, I think I want to be a huge star. And,
and then you realize you're in Utah.
And then you go to the airport the next day. Nobody knows you. You're not going to the head of the line. Just sit down in your coach seat.
Let's go back, if I may, Mike. Toss a question at you out of left field. What were you like at senior school? What were you like in your final year at school? Did you know what you wanted to be?
Yes, I always wanted to be an actor, and I pigeonholed myself into that early on. When I was a freshman in high school, and went to college for it. Once I started doing stand-up, it was something I always talked about doing, but I didn't do it until I moved to New York. I was doing acting. they call it in between shows, but what it means was nobody was hiring me or casting me. So I was bartending and waiting tables, and I finally got up and did an open mic, $5 for 5 minutes, and just kept doing it after that. High school, I was more of a smart aleck than I was class clown. I wasn't voted class clown. That wasn't necessarily what I was doing, but I always had this kind of, I guess, sarcasm that either you like it or you don't. And if you don't, you can go ahead and get off the ride. You don't have to ride along. Nobody's making you.
Exactly. Because you mentioned in Dry Bar, and we'll go back, because I went back and I looked at some of your other comedy. I didn't realize how tall David Hasselhoff is, or the converse, how short you are. Because
yeah, I'm 5'7". He's like 8 feet tall.
I know, the man's ridiculous. And when he shook your hand, was your first live TV in 2016. When he shook your hand on stage, you disappeared. I mean, I don't know if he went off stage and laughed, but I know I sort of went, wow. I had nothing to compare you to a Dry Bar, but now that I have the Hoff next to you, it's a scary sight.
Yeah, he is like 6'3", 6'4". He's ridiculous. Yeah. He's ridiculous.
A very nice man, though. I think he's funny. He's self-deprecating from time to time. He's able to take a little bit of the piss of himself.
If I could have picked it, I would have picked a comic to be our warm-up, to be our host. He's not a comic. He knows that.
Yeah.
He did the setup things that I don't have in the clip. I don't know if you saw the whole show or
no,
you saw
just you.
Right. Yeah. So when he first started, you do, like any show where you do 10 minutes up front. And he wanted to go out into the audience as far as, hey, does anybody have a joke? And so he had a plant in the audience for someone to tell a joke. And then he said, anybody have a question for the Hoff? And he refers to himself as the Hoff, which couldn't be more annoying. And then, so somebody asked. So I was the first one up that night. And and I asked the stage manager, can he not ask people stuff in the audience? But he really wants to. Yeah, I heard him. What I want to do is not have that happen. And so when I got up, that's why you have people chime in. Yeah. I'm the only guy to have that happen, where the audience chimes in because they thought it was okay. And after they were told, hey, let's not talk during this, just be an audience. So I guinea pigged it. And I got to deal with the only guy on any Gotham season to get heckled 3 times. Not even just once, not just one guy. 3 times people yelled stuff up. I'm like, come on.
But then you could have always done your whiter than white piece, and then maybe that would have calmed them down. Or did that only come later?
That comes, I don't know if I did that on that special or not. I think I did. I didn't do it?
No, I don't think you did.
Maybe it's too long. That bit was probably too long. You get 9 minutes.
Okay.
And TV 9 is 9. When they counted down, I was dead on. That one was perfect. That surprised me when the guy gave me 30 seconds and I was like,
yes.
It was great. It was great.
I did laugh at your road rage because years ago it happened to me. A woman cut me off. And before I could hit the hooter or flash her a finger or anything, she mouthed very, very clearly, I love you. And I just burst out laughing. You can't fight that. I don't know who she was. She didn't stop. I didn't take a registration number or anything like that. But I've never forgotten her. And every time I drive past that intersection, which I do very often, I always think very fondly of her and what might have become of our relationship had we stopped to exchange phone numbers.
But she just cut you off. She didn't hit you or anything.
No.
Okay.
She came through an amber light. And she realized how I saw her coming out of my peripheral vision. So I stopped. And she realized. So before hooting was happening, she figured the discretion was the better part of valor and mouthed something nice at me, and then perhaps she'll get a good reaction, which is exactly what she got.
That's great. That's very great. That never happens here.
Well,
in New York.
No.
There's no I love you in New York.
No, definitely not. Also, New Yorkers have a rather sick sense of humor. If, like me, when I've been to New York, and I have a couple of times, you ask them for directions. They go, oh, it's just a couple of blocks down the road. Now, if you've never been to New York before, and you know as well as I do, Mike, there are short blocks and long blocks.
Right.
And the first time I got caught, the second visit to New York, when I asked directions, and the guy said, oh, it's just a couple of blocks. I said, short blocks or long blocks? And he went, you've been here before, haven't you? And I went, yes, indeed, I have.
I'm not falling for that trick again.
Because those long blocks are long.
They're really long. Yeah,
3 hours later, you're still walking.
Right.
Where is home for you though? You're not a native born New Yorker, are you?
I'm not. I was born and raised in North Carolina.
Okay.
And moved around a little bit. Went to middle school in Cincinnati, and then went to high school in Delaware.
Okay, I love Cincinnati.
I did too, but I was too young to know that it was not a great town.
We had the TV series here, WKRP in Cincinnati, which was a huge hit. And I worked in radio for 23 years. And I know now that WKRP could never have worked, that radio stations don't run like that. And
right,
don't have people working like that.
But they were great. That was a great cast.
It was indeed.
It was a great show.
Yeah. I ran what they called a mini marathon from the fountain that is featured in the opening credits of that show. And somebody said to me, why are you running? I said, I'm training. And he said, what for? I said, an 80-miler. And he ran away from me, and I never saw him again. I was hoping to have somebody to pace me for the 8 miles that we did together. And one hill that Cincinnati has. But now your comedy, is it based on, is it purely observational comedy, or do you throw in from other people, stuff that you remember maybe from your childhood or from their childhood for that matter?
Most of my stuff is definitely based on fact. It really happened. And then you embellish it to hopefully have a joke.
You're right.
Something with a punchline. Stories, but you can't ask people to hold on for a 3-minute story and then not give them something at the end. Everybody's watched that guy and you're like, there's nothing there. They're not giving you another 3 minutes. You better come out with something funny quick. But I do. I like to kind of draw the picture. But it's all based on fact. Things that happened to my son happened to my son. And things that happened with the wife happened with the wife. There's some things that I'll change around a little bit to make them funny. But I'm not that guy who can sit there and write 2 guys walk in a bar. I wish I could do that. Those guys, every joke that you've ever heard, somebody wrote that. And it's street jokes, whatever. The guy sitting at the bus stop and just come up with that is amazing to me. I wish I had that talent in any way, but I sit there and there can be a situation that happened and I'll know more than likely right away that that's going to be a joke and that can be funny.
Right.
And there's times where it happens and there's times where I think it was going to be funny and the audience is like, not at all. I can't even believe you thought that was a joke. And that happens too. It just happens right now with COVID. You don't know. I have all this, you have new stuff and there's no place to try it.
Well, this is the thing. Somebody told me many years ago that comedy is the only form of acting where you get to rehearse in front of a live audience, because you can try the material out standing in front of a mirror at home and you go, but that's not funny. And then you step in front of an audience and they fall about with laughter. Or the converse happens. You laugh at yourself in the mirror, step up on stage and they go, really? I could have stayed at home for this.
Yeah. It's mostly that. It's mostly that. It's mostly you thinking that it's going to be funny. And the audience is like, not at all. Just order another drink. Just get something. But I don't rehearse in front of a mirror.
But at dry bar, they can't do that. So you not only have you got to be clean, that audience is sober as judges. So your material has to be good. And I mean, that audience that I watched you work on dry bar, that audience was with you every single step of the way, Mike. There wasn't a single gag that died.
They were on every single joke. That's exactly right. From when I walked on, they couldn't have been better. There's not, and there wasn't a club in the country where there was a better audience that night. They could have been as good someplace, but there was no comic that was performing that same night that had a better audience. Yeah. They were phenomenal.
Now talk to me about the country bar that you went into. And the mechanical
that's a true story.
The way you tell it, were you married already when you watched those ladies ride that bull?
Yes. Yeah.
It was one of the gigs you didn't take your wife to, I should imagine.
No. She always works. She can't really go. I mean, she has a job too. She's a dental hygienist.
Oh, okay.
So she works. So I go whenever I go. But that was in Raleigh, North Carolina,
mm-hmm.
and a club called Good Nights. It used to be Charlie Goodnights years ago, and now it's just Good Nights. And the other comic wasn't going to hang out afterwards. He just went back to his room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, is there someplace I can go? And they said, yeah, right next door. And they walked me over there and they introduced me to a couple of people. And so I just hung out. I didn't know what I was getting into. They said it was a country bar. And I was like, well, if that's the only place, then that's the only place. And I was really just hoping they had a pool table and I could sit there and watch whatever game happened to be on and shoot a little pool maybe, or watch. I enjoy watching as much as I like playing. And then I could just go back, have a couple of beers and then go back. And it ended up being one of my favorite bits that I did for a while. It was such a crazy night. And Raleigh is where North Carolina State University is.
Okay.
And so you had all these college kids that were in there doing shots and being crazy. And then they had the bull. And I was like, well, this just adds everything. I'm not leaving until people get on that bull. How could I possibly leave? And it was great. The one thing that I don't say, I just didn't know how to add it in. But there's one point, my favorite part of the night was there was a little girl that was on there. And I say little girl, but she was just young. But the guys running it, of course, were also college kids. And they must not have liked her at all. And so they took her around. She did a couple of runs. And then they flipped it. And she almost hit this back wall face first. Like her hands barely saved her face. I'm crying. People like her friends were like, oh my God. And I'm like, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen. She like hit that wall and slid down like a cartoon. And I was like, I love this bar. I am going to country bars from now on. It was great.
Have you played cruise ships before?
I have. I started doing them a lot right before I had just gotten off one like the week before COVID happened, before we shut everything down. Like I said, the guys that do dry bar, a lot of them are cruises, do bars and everything.
That's what I thought. Some years ago, I was on a cruise as a guest. I was there to write a story about the ship. It turned out that my cousin was the cruise director. The cruise director was a very good friend of his. So my cousin had phoned him and said, listen, David's going to be on the ship. I go to one of the evenings. There's a comedian on stage. There's a bit of an interaction, and I do stand-up comedy. So he looks at me and goes, what's your name? And I do that stupid thing that people do, and I'm sure they do it to you too. You turn around and look behind you. And he goes, no, I'm talking to you, and the questions will get harder. And we eventually end up on stage together doing a double act until I get to a point and I say, listen, you're being paid to do this. Let me just go and sit down, thinking I'd been set up.
Right.
Get back after the show, go and have a chat to him. And I go, I suppose my cousin set this up, didn't he? And he goes, no, I didn't know you from a bar of soap. I just picked you out of the audience. But then, unlike you who walk through Utah Airport, I go leave the venue, walking back to my cabin. I get stopped every 5 meters going, that was awesome. When are you performing again?
Yeah, see, you get what we call ship famous. You're ship famous. Yeah. For that, the rest of the time on there, everybody, oh, that's the guy. That's the guy.
That's exactly it. It was a hell of a lot of fun. Your best gigs and worst gigs, Mike?
Best gig may have been dry bar. It was great. Loved it. but there's a lot of clubs around that are all towns. Syracuse used to have a great club, one of my favorite clubs in the city. And that's, yes, it's one of my favorite, but talking to other comics, the guys that had performed there, it was called Wise Guys. And it was the perfect space, low ceiling. You're right there. I want the audience to be right on top of me. And I can talk to them, look at them, love it. Worst gigs, backyard. There was this woman in her mid-30s that graduated from nursing school, and this was her graduation party. And what you don't need is a comic, but we like comedy, so we want you to come. And so it's out in Long Island. I drive out there. It's the middle of the afternoon. It's hot. It's August. And they have a tent, and they have people on a back deck. And talk to the husband who's running it. So there's family there. There's other nursing students, but they're all in their 20s. And then you have the family there. Nobody cares about me. They couldn't care less if I'm there. So I have to do probably 40, 45 minutes, which is ridiculous in that situation. Yeah. And so as soon as you get there, you're like, oh, this isn't going to be worth it. This is one of those situations where no matter what they're paying at the end, it wasn't worth it for me. And they don't want to give you the check, but I'm going to take your check. Yeah. And so the guy says, you can stand over there and do it. And I go, you mean where nobody is? And he said, yeah. I go, I'm not. I said, I'm going to use he had a DJ, and I said, I'm going to use his microphone, and I'm going to stand as close to the people as I can so that they'll pay attention. So now I have whoever's in under the tent. Next to the tent, they're playing volleyball. So every now and then a ball comes near me, which I like volleyball. I would play, but I have to do comedy. And so the ball goes by, and there's the drunk uncle who is about 2 feet away from me, but he's standing next to me. And he's going, do it, tell him a joke. And I'm trying to, but he's too drunk to understand anything that I'm saying. And nobody takes him away. He just stands there the whole time. Somebody shows up late, and they have a big hello in the back of the tent. So now I've lost that table, and it's just me just plugging through, just getting through. Now the nursing students are going to like kind of duck and do this in front of me because that's distracting and would help. Yeah. And there was nothing good about that gig. Not one positive thing. Even the check wasn't great. If the check had been like thousands of dollars, I could have paid off every bill, maybe, but it wasn't that. There were tolls involved going across the bridge to get over there. It was brutal in every way. And the only good thing, as I was leaving, I was walking out the backyard, and there's a little gate that led out to the driveway in the street and to my car. And that uncle who had been standing next to me was throwing up in the corner next to the gate. And I was like, well, that's a perfect ending. That's exactly the way this show should end. And I think I've been heckled. Everybody's done that. But that gig as a whole had no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
There's just something terrifying when and I'm sure when you drove out to that gig, in the back of your mind, you were going, I should never have accepted this. I could have stayed at home and watched the game, or spent time with my family. But no, I've got to schlep all the way out to Long Island. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I know it's not going to end well.
You always have that feeling, like, especially middle of the afternoon, family function. You know how many comedy clubs are open at 2 p.m? None. You big stupids. And so it was just, it really did. There was nothing. As I was leaving and the check was in the pocket, I was still, I don't need to do this anymore. You're
going to go home and become an accountant.
Yeah, I'd do anything. I don't care. I'd be a first grade teacher. I don't care. And they're brutal. Who wants to do that? But if kids are going to have to like walk next to somebody with his bodily fluids coming out of his mouth, it might as well be a 6-year-old. Oh, it's awful.
Well, you can always change. You know, there is time. You could be in another episode of Law and. What did you play in Law and Order? I tried to find the episode you were in, but I couldn't.
You can't find it. I watch marathons of it, and my episode is never on. I don't know if they hated it. I don't know what the deal is. But I was just an extra. I was literally in a nightclub where there was a murder and a rape, which I'm pretty sure is every show. So you didn't really have to see mine. It happens on every show. So murder, rape in a nightclub, and everybody in the nightclub, we were all going to be arrested.
Okay.
And so I had the plastic cuffs on, and they were doing, and he said, you just ad lib, just go do whatever you want to do. And I was killing it. I didn't know any better. And so I'm saying every line I can. There's girls that are dancers, and I'm going at them, and the guys who are playing the cops, I have lines for them. And it was great. Now, people were dying laughing, and then the director comes over and he goes, "You need to stop."
Yeah.
I go, "You said, I thought gloves were off." And he goes, "No, I got to get this scene in. You're killing this scene." And I was like, all right. So I don't know that I made it. But I have the check, so I can always use it.
And was that a better check than our backyard garden party in the afternoon?
It wasn't, because I wasn't union at that time. I was even one of the guys who got like a peanut butter sandwich. I don't even think I got peanut butter and jelly. I think I just sat there with every other extra and just had my peanut butter sandwich and water, probably. I didn't get anything.
What has happened to Mike P. Burton's career with COVID? I mean, here in South Africa, the comedians that I've spoken to, everything is shut down for them. The clubs aren't open. A lot of them aren't doing online stuff. They don't have the opportunities like Dry Bar here. They didn't have the opportunity to travel interprovincially or interstate like you have until just 2 weeks ago. And still, we here are scared about going out into public. They can't be more than 50 people in a venue, which is not great if you're playing in a 3,000 seater and there are only 50 people and they have to be 2 meters apart. It's not a nice audience. Where do you look for a start?
It's similar here. They started kind of letting comedy clubs open. I did this comedy clubs out in Long Island. I did a weekend. I did Friday and Saturday shows. And again, they had the social distancing, but this club called Governors went above and beyond. We had plastic in front of the stage. They had plexiglass in front of the stage. So you're basically in an aquarium, and you walk up with your mask on. I took my own mic. You switch it out, take the mask off, you do the show. You're in the same room with them, but there's still a disconnect because there's a wall in front of you.
Yeah.
And you have the light, so now you're you're performing for your reflection. You can see your reflection. So it's like performing in a mirror, which I don't do.
Yeah.
And so that was a little weird. It was great to be out. It was great to do comedy again. But that was the week before that. I did an outdoor show. Some people are trying to book outdoor shows, and that place, they thought there'd maybe be 75, and there's 180 people, and they were great. To knock the rust off, I hadn't performed in 4 months at that time.
Yeah.
And so I had to do 30 minutes, and I listened to old tapes. I listened to old, everything's old. So I listened to recorded shows that I had just to remember what I do. And that was one of those places where I tried a couple of new ones and it got 0. And I was like, yep, that's exactly what that deserves. Yep, that was nothing. You're exactly right. I did a Zoom show, but it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Because you can see the people, but there's still no connection really. And that comedy is what it needs. That you can do a play, you can do a movie, and you don't have to have that audience there. You can treat it like a rehearsal. But comedy, you have to have that interaction and that intimacy that a club provides.
Because I'm sure you know, and it must be even worse on Zoom. When you're doing a club, for instance, there are 300 people, let's say, in the venue. 299 of them are laughing hysterically. But you will find that one that is being judgmental in the front row or somewhere, have arms folded, no laughter, and you now decide to play your entire set to that person. And it doesn't work, because you can be the funniest person on earth and they won't laugh. For whatever reason, they don't want to be there, or they're there and then they want to go home. But it's the same with Zoom, because if I'm talking to you now and all of a sudden something happens off camera here and you telling me a story and I sort of do this, you don't know what I'm looking at.
Right.
It's very disconcerting if you're trying to engage and you can't.
Right.
Short of saying, boy, what have you been looking at?
You have that room full of people and then one guy turns his camera off and you're like, well, I lost one. You can clearly see it. It's not even the guy just getting up to go to the bathroom. He could have done that, but he's just gone. It's just space now. It is. It's
Mike.
It's
I know that I would love to talk to you for much longer, but I know that you're on a tight schedule because of your son. So I want to say thank you very, very much for taking the time and the trouble to chat to me. I know that I was an unknown quantity to you. I had the edge, I think, on you because I'd watched you perform and I knew what I was getting into, but you didn't. So thank you very, very much for taking the time and the trouble and for being in conversation with me today. And I wish you all the very best. And I hope one day that somebody will invite you to South Africa when international travel is open and that you can come and perform here.
It'd be great. It'd be great. I met one singer from South Africa, Jessica Kinnear, and it couldn't have been sweeter, nicest. She met her on the ship. And,
I was about to say, Jess does ships.
Yeah. Oh, you know her?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's a small industry. Small industry, this, Mike. If we had the time afterwards, we could talk about a lot of people in common, but maybe for another day and another time. I'm sure your son is probably going, talk to him, Dad, talk to him. I don't need to do online schooling. I can miss the day.
I appreciate you having me on. It's been really great. Really nice to meet you.
Just quickly before you go, contact details if people don't know you. Maybe they'd like to follow your comedy going forward. You have a website, I know, which is beautifully laid out, very well done. And the details are?
You can go to mikepburton.com. It's as simple as that.
Great stuff. Mike, once again, thanks so much for being in conversation with me this afternoon. You take care.
Thank you very much.